While burying the twins, an old man appeared from nowhere and opened their mouths, pouring some unclear substance into them. What happened afterward is incredible. It was one cold Friday evening when Gabriella and Isabella were born and warmly wrapped in the hands of their mother, Martha. She whispered that she would protect them, arm them with strength against adversaries, and teach them tenacity, knowing full well any judgment that may come from their past. Determined that they should not experience much of what she did face, Martha vowed that she would raise her daughters as proud, bold, and strong. She had labeled herself a failure, but her daughters' lives were to glitter with the right milestones at the right times. Married at 30, children by 35. As they grew older, Martha introduced strict rules. No dating until 25, and warnings to guard their heart so as not to give it out to men so easily. In her mind, this was the way to prevent the many heartbreaks she had experienced. The only problem is that, with each layer of protection, walls were going up that she knew little about, and in reality, reaped other negative results. Was Martha safeguarding her daughters or crippling herself emotionally? It follows her story from when Martha, then 18 years, resided in the silent village of Bellover, desired by various rich suitors who only got a cold reception as she was smitten by Alberto, a 15-year older than her poor hunter. At 20, having had to observe him from a distance for 2 years, she finally summoned her nerve and declared her love to him. Their acquaintance grew with time into a tender and loving relationship. Martha loved Alberto with all her heart, though she was aware that for him, this was not as deep as for her. She hoped the love would grow, whereas Alberto considered her an ideal wife, young, beautiful, caring, and subordinate. One evening Alberto proposed, and Martha accepted with dreams of a life full of love and joy. Reality was harsh, however. In less than a year, their incompatibilities became glaring. Martha yearned for the affection and attention Alberto withheld, and though she was fertile, they remained childless. This mysterious inability to conceive further strained their marriage. Over the years, now grown into a decade, their relationship had disintegrated into distant cohabitation. Rumors of Alberto's infidelity had swirled in, whispers of a younger woman in some neighboring village. His absences grew longer and longer until one day he vanished. 3 years went by and he never returned. By 40, Martha was consumed by loneliness and despair. It was during this fragile time that she met Sam, a businessman visiting Bellover. Their paths crossed at the local market, sparking an unexpected connection. With Alberto long gone, Sam's kindness and unwavering affection offered Martha a glimpse of the love she had always desired. He was everything Alberto wasn't: attentive, loving, and supportive. This story of love, heartbreak, and the relentless resolve of a mother does not end here. Continue viewing as the threads of Martha's decisions come undone in unexpected and gripping ways. Pretty soon, Martha and Sam secretly started a love affair. The affair was just perfect in her imagination. Beautiful, perfect, just the way she had desired with all the love. The dream shattered one fine morning when she went on a visit to him, but got to know from neighbors that Sam had left this village forever. The hurt that day was beyond the vocabulary of words. Years later, that betrayal explained the harshness Martha had shown toward her daughters. She often yelled at them whenever she saw them talking to boys, her fear of their hearts being broken fueling her strictness. 2 weeks after Sam's sudden departure, Martha discovered she was pregnant. That pregnancy brought Gabriella and Isabella into the world. Martha, despite being belittled by villagers for having children out of wedlock, refused to allow ridicule to break her spirit. When Alberto heard of the birth of the twins, he briefly reappeared to collect his remaining belongings and again vanished. A second question cropped up for which nobody had an explanation. Why, after all the time together, hadn't Martha conceived? Only Martha did not know. What she did know, however, was that her daughters would never be made to suffer the same pain. Yet her overprotection started casting a shadow upon their lives. Their childhood was repressive and lacked thrill, and their teenage years were no exception. Martha often kept them indoors to protect them from the outside world. She did not want them to experience early heartbreaks and thus allowed them to date only after they turned 25, believing that maturity would make them recognize deceit more easily. But then 17-year-old Gabriella took up with a boyfriend in secret. Her twin, Isabella, did the same thing when she turned 18, without telling Martha or her twin sister. Meanwhile, Martha's health started to decline. At age 59, she got some devastating news. She had less than 1 year to live. From her deathbed, Martha extracted the promise from her daughters to watch out for their heart. "Don't love too soon, and live your life not looking at it with regret someday," she would plead one morning. Yet despite these promises, Martha would later die 2 weeks onward, leaving Gabriella and Isabella to their own fates with her words and burdens tucked in their hearts. Even after Martha was gone, Gabriella and Isabella continued to hide their relationships, not only from the world but also from each other. Then, after a year, they started showing symptoms of pregnancy, but they just brushed it off, saying they probably had the flu. So in love, yet so ashamed to face one another as they have broken the promise made to their mother. 1 week later, Gabriella left for home to make the disclosure to her boyfriend. The boyfriend invited her over for celebration, but little did she know that he was planning evil things. An hour later, she came back home, really disturbed, although Isabella wasn't home yet. Half an hour later, Isabella also arrived, and the sisters started talking. Suddenly, both were struck by unbearable stomach pains. They collapsed to the ground, certain they were living their final moments. Through her agony, Isabella gasped, "I think Tony Marshall, my boyfriend, poisoned me. I'm pregnant, sis," before passing out. Writhing in pain, Gabriella was shocked. Tony Marshall. The name sounded all too familiar. He was her boyfriend, too. It all clicked in that instant. Tony had been secretly dating them both and, upon learning they were pregnant, decided to end their lives. Hours later, neighbors discovered the sisters seeming lifeless in their home. Since no relatives were close by, villagers opted to bury them as quickly as possible. But with the coffins just seconds away from entering their graves, an unlikely figure emerged, Alberto, now 75 years old. He approached the coffins, opened them, and poured something down their mouths. Suddenly, after a few moments, Gabriella and Isabella began to cough and sat up alive, looking so bewildered. The villagers were terrified and scattered, screaming that the dead had risen. That evening, Alberto told them everything. He said he'd left their mother all those years ago, but after her death felt some duty to keep watch over her daughters. He kept an eye on them but knew how they felt about Tony. 2 days in advance, he saw him in the shop of the toxicologist but did not connect the dots at that moment. He discovered they had been killed, realized that Tony was behind it all, and rushed to rescue them with an antidote. Later, the police arrested Tony and justice was served. Then, 9 months later after the incident, Gabriella and Isabella went into labor, each delivering a set of twins. Poor Martha had done her best to shelter her daughters, but unlike her, Gabriella and Isabella vowed not to raise their children that way. They took from their mother the great lesson: it's okay to fall, mess up, and not always make it. They in turn would teach their girls to rise above the worst of circumstances, to push through the darkness and into the light. Now, what do you think of the story? Leave your comment below. I'll see you next time.